Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more spine-chilling true crime stories. Today, we're diving into a tale so twisted, it defies belief, a story that will make you question the very fabric of trust and deception. We're unraveling the perplexing case of Justin Newman and Ari Squire, a story that involves a job offer that turned deadly, a staged death, and a manhunt that gripped the nation. So, grab your favorite comfort snack, because you're going to need it. This is a story you won't easily forget. Justin Newman was not just another face in the crowd, he was a force of nature, born and raised in a small, tight-knit community. He was the kind of person who knew everyone and everyone knew him. From a young age, he showed an extraordinary aptitude for mechanics. By the time he was 12, he had already rebuilt an old lawnmower engine, much to the astonishment of his family. But his talents didn't stop there. He was an avid outdoorsman who loved camping, fishing, and hiking. He was the captain of his high school soccer team and an honor roll student. He had a soft spot for animals and volunteered at the local animal shelter. He was the guy who would shovel his elderly neighbor's driveway without being asked, the one who organized community cleanup events. He was also a dreamer. He had a vision board in his room filled with pictures of high-performance cars, technical schools, and world maps marking places he wanted to visit. He had a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, and even a retirement plan, which included opening his own auto repair shop and traveling the world. His relationship with his family was deeply rooted in love and mutual respect. He was the glue that held everyone together during tough times. His younger sister looked up to him as her hero, and his parents were immensely proud of the responsible and compassionate man he was becoming. And it's this multifaceted, vibrant young man that we're talking about today. A young man whose life was abruptly and tragically cut short, leaving a void in the hearts of all who knew him. Now, let's talk about Ari Squire. On the surface, Ari seemed like a man who had it all together. He was a successful entrepreneur, owning a chain of auto repair shops. He drove a luxury car and lived in a beautiful home with his wife. To the outside world, Ari was living the American dream. But behind that polished exterior was a man riddled with complexities and contradictions. Ari was known to be highly intelligent but also manipulative. He had a knack for bending situations to his favor, often at the expense of others. His employees described him as a demanding boss, one who was never fully satisfied with their work, always pushing for more. His personal life was equally complicated. Though married, his relationship with his wife was strained, to say the least. Friends and family noted that Ari seemed increasingly distant and preoccupied in the months leading up to the incident. There were whispers about financial troubles, about debts that were piling up, and about a man desperate to maintain his lifestyle at any cost. Ari was also a bit of a loner. Despite his social standing and business success, he had very few close friends. He was a man who kept his cards close to his chest, revealing very little about his true thoughts and feelings. And perhaps most chillingly, Ari had a fascination with true crime stories. He was a regular on online forums discussing unsolved mysteries and high-profile criminal cases. It's almost as if he was studying them, but for what purpose, we can only speculate. So, who really was Ari Squire? A successful businessman living the dream, or a deeply troubled individual teetering on the edge? The answer, as you'll soon find out, is far more complicated than you could ever imagine. Alright, folks, let's get into the crux of this haunting tale. The point where the lives of Justin Newman and Ari Squire tragically intersect. Justin, as we know, was a young man eager to make something of himself. He was actively looking for work, trying to pave a path for his future. And then came the job offer that seemed too good to be true. Ari Squire, aware of Justin's desperate need for employment, saw an opportunity. He reached out to Justin with an offer for a construction job, promising good pay and the chance to learn valuable skills. On paper, it was the perfect job for someone like Justin, who was hungry for a break. But what Justin didn't know was that Ari had ulterior motives so dark they're almost unfathomable. Ari didn't just see a potential employee in Justin. He saw a pawn in a twisted game he was about to play. The job site was isolated, far away from prying eyes. Ari took meticulous steps to ensure that no one would be around, creating the perfect setting for his diabolical plan. He even went as far as to tell his own employees that the site was off limits for the day, raising no suspicions. Justin, naive and trusting, walked right into Ari's trap. He arrived at the job site, tools in hand, ready to work and make a good impression. Little did he know that this job offer was not the opportunity he had hoped for, but rather a sinister plot that would cost him his life. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with an unspoken dread. And yet, Justin, ever the optimist, couldn't have possibly imagined the horror that awaited him. Okay, everyone, brace yourselves. We're diving into the grim details of the crime scene, a place where the air was thick with deception and the ground tainted with tragedy. This is where Ari Squire's malevolent plan came to fruition. and where Justin Newman's life was cruelly snuffed out. The crime scene was meticulously staged. Ari had planned every detail down to the last inch. He killed Justin in cold blood, showing a level of callousness that's hard to comprehend. But Ari didn't stop there. No, his plan was far more insidious. Ari set the scene to make it look like an accident, a tragic mishap at a construction site. He used tools and equipment to create a believable setting, placing them carefully around Justin's lifeless body. But the most shocking part, Ari staged his own death. That's right, he wanted the world to believe that he, too, had died in this accident. He went to great lengths to sell this lie. He even set fire to the construction site, aiming to destroy any evidence that could link him to the crime. He planted personal items, like his wallet and ID, near Justin's body, fully intending for the authorities to misidentify the corpse as his own. It was a plan so audacious, so coldly calculated, that it leaves you questioning the depths of human depravity. Ari thought he had committed the perfect crime, that he would vanish and start anew while the world mourned two tragic deaths. But as we'll see, even the best laid plans can unravel. Alright, folks, let's talk about the first responders, the men and women who arrived at what they believed was a tragic accident. This is where the story takes another twist, a moment where the veil of Ari's deception began to lift ever so slightly. When the police and fire department arrived, they were met with a scene of utter devastation. The fire had consumed much of the construction site, leaving behind a charred and smoky ruin. Amidst the ashes lay a body, believed at first to be Ari Squire due to the personal items scattered around. The authorities initially treated the case as an unfortunate accident. They saw the tools, the fire, and a body that seemed to match Ari's identity. It all appeared to be a tragic but straightforward case. But something didn't sit right with the investigators. There were inconsistencies, small details that gnawed at the edges of their professional intuition. For instance, the fire seemed too controlled, too perfect for erasing evidence. The placement of the tools and personal items seemed almost staged. And then there was the body itself. Though burned, it didn't quite match Ari's physical characteristics upon closer inspection. These nagging doubts led the police to dig deeper, to question the narrative that was initially laid out before them. And as they pulled at the threads of this story, the entire fabric of Ari's deceit began to unravel. Let's take a moment to remember that at the heart of this twisted tale are families, real people whose lives have been irrevocably changed. The news of the incident sent shockwaves through both the Newman and Squire families, and their reactions were a study in contrast and heartbreak. When Justin's family heard about his death, they were devastated. Justin, a young man full of dreams and potential, was suddenly gone. His mother couldn't believe it. She kept saying it was a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. His friends were in disbelief, sharing stories of Justin's kindness, his aspirations to start his own business, and his love for his family. The community rallied around them, but the void left by Justin's absence was palpable. On the other side, Ari's family was initially relieved, thinking they had lost Ari in a tragic accident. But as the investigation unfolded and Ari's dark secrets came to light, their relief turned into a complex mix of emotions, shock, betrayal, and a sense of loss so profound it's hard to put into words. They had to grapple with the fact that the Ari they thought they knew was capable of such a heinous act. The emotional toll on both families was immense. For Justin's family, it was a journey of seeking justice for their lost son, while Ari's family had to come to terms with the grim reality of who Ari had become. It's a stark reminder that the ripple effects of such a crime go far beyond the individuals directly involved, affecting entire communities. As the initial shock began to settle, the focus shifted to the investigation. This was no ordinary case. It was a labyrinth of deception, and the investigators had their work cut out for them. At first, the police were stumped. The crime scene was meticulously staged, and Ari Squire had seemingly vanished into thin air. But then, a breakthrough. A keen-eyed detective noticed inconsistencies in the evidence at the crime scene. The position of the bodies, the lack of struggle, and most importantly, the discovery of a hidden cache of documents that Ari had failed to destroy. These documents contained plans, timelines, and even research on identity theft. It was as if they had stumbled upon Ari's dark blueprint. Then came the DNA tests. Initially, it was assumed that the charred body was Ari's, but DNA analysis revealed a shocking twist. It was Justin's. This was the game changer. The focus of the investigation shifted dramatically. Ari Squire was no longer a victim, he was the prime suspect. The net began to tighten around Ari. Financial records showed that he had recently purchased a significant amount of life insurance, adding another layer to his twisted motive. And then, the final nail in the coffin, surveillance footage from a gas station, showing Ari buying the very items used in the crime. The investigation had reached a critical juncture. What started as a confusing puzzle was now coming into focus, each piece revealing the horrifying extent of Ari's premeditation and deceit. Just when you thought this case couldn't get any more twisted, hold on to your seats, because what comes next is truly mind-boggling. The police had been operating under the assumption that Ari Squire was dead, a victim of his own twisted plot. But then, a seismic shift in the narrative occurred. An anonymous tip led investigators to a small motel in a neighboring state. The tip was vague but intriguing enough to warrant immediate action. When the police arrived, they found a room registered under a false name, but the belongings inside told a different story. Personal items that could only belong to Ari were scattered around the room. And then, the most shocking piece of evidence, a laptop open to an email account in Ari's name, with messages that outlined plans for fleeing the country. It was as if Ari had just stepped out and would be back any minute. The atmosphere was electric. You could feel the tension in the air. The investigators realized they were on the cusp of a major breakthrough. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community. And the investigative team. Ari Squire was alive, and he was on the run. The man who had staged his own death, deceived his family, and taken a young man's life was still out there, possibly plotting his next move. The audacity of Ari's plan was both horrifying and fascinating. It was like something out of a crime thriller, but this was real life, and the stakes were incredibly high. The hunt for Ari Squire was back on, and it was now a race against time to bring him to justice before he could disappear forever. All right, folks, we've reached a pivotal moment in this harrowing tale. After the shocking revelation that Ari Squire was alive, the manhunt was on. Law enforcement agencies across states were on high alert, and the public was both terrified and captivated. The question on everyone's mind was, where is Ari Squire? The break in the case came from an unexpected source, a small-town gas station's surveillance footage. Ari had been careful, but not careful enough. He was caught on camera, filling up a car that matched the description of a stolen vehicle connected to him. The tension was palpable as law enforcement closed in on his location. Helicopters hovered above, K-9 units were dispatched, and SWAT teams were on standby. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation and dread. And then, the moment everyone had been waiting for, Ari Squire was found. But it wasn't the triumphant capture everyone had hoped for. Ari, realizing he was cornered, took his own life before he could be apprehended. The emotions that followed were a complex mix of relief, disappointment, and a lingering sense of unease. Yes, Ari Squire could no longer harm anyone else, but the fact that he chose his own ending robbed many of the closure they so desperately needed. It was a grim conclusion to a case that had twisted and turned in unimaginable ways. Ari Squire's downfall was as dramatic as his crimes, leaving us all to ponder the depths of human depravity and the lengths some will go to escape justice. Okay, guys, we're diving into the courtroom now, where the drama unfolded in a way that even the most seasoned lawyers and judges said they'd never seen before. The absence of Ari Squire, the main perpetrator, cast a heavy shadow over the proceedings, but the quest for justice for Justin Newman was far from over. The prosecution had a mountain of evidence, surveillance footage, forensic reports, and damning testimonies from both families. But without Ari Squire in the dock, the atmosphere was tinged with a sense of incompleteness, a gaping hole where the villain of the story should have been. Justin's family took the stand, their voices quivering but resolute. They painted a vivid picture of a young man full of promise, whose life was cruelly snatched away. The courtroom was silent, save for the muffled sobs of family and friends. Then came the expert witnesses. Forensic analysts meticulously broke down how Ari staged the crime scene, complete with visual aids that left the courtroom in a state of horrified fascination. The level of premeditation was chilling, to say the least. But the most shocking moment came when a letter written by Ari Squire was read aloud. In it, he tried to justify his actions, showing a complete lack of remorse. The room was thick with disgust and disbelief. The verdict was unanimous. Even in his absence, Ari Squire was found guilty on all counts. While it was a legal victory, the emotional toll of the case left everyone drained and somber. So, there you have it. The legal proceedings may have reached a conclusion, but the emotional and psychological wounds are far from healed. The story of Justin Newman and Ari Squire serves as a grim reminder of the complexities and, sometimes, the shortcomings of our justice system. All right, folks, let's talk about the aftermath that rippled through the community. The verdict might have been reached in the courtroom, but the court of public opinion was another battleground altogether. The news of Ari Squire's calculated crime and the tragic loss of Justin Newman ignited a firestorm of public outrage. Protests erupted in the streets, with people holding signs that read "Justice for Justin" and "Hold Ari accountable." But it wasn't just about anger, it was also about solidarity. The community rallied around Justin's family, organizing fundraisers and vigils. Candles flickered in the night as people gathered, their faces a mix of sorrow and determination. Local businesses also stepped in, offering a portion of their proceeds to go towards a scholarship fund in Justin's name. It was a heartwarming display of community spirit, a silver lining in a story clouded by darkness. Social media was ablaze with discussions, debates, and calls for reform in the justice system. Hashtags like Justice for Justin trended for weeks, and a petition demanding a review of how such cases are handled garnered thousands of signatures. The case also sparked a broader conversation about the need for better mental health resources and background checks, especially for people involved in caregiving or mentorship roles. Community leaders and activists took to various platforms to voice these concerns. In the midst of the turmoil, what stood out was the resilience and unity of the community. They turned their collective grief and outrage into action, vowing to ensure that what happened to Justin Newman would lead to lasting change. So, as we navigate the emotional labyrinth that this case has laid before us, it's crucial to remember the power of community and collective action. The fight for justice doesn't end in the courtroom. It continues in the hearts and minds of each one of us. As we near the end of this harrowing journey, let's take a moment to reflect on the aftermath and the lasting impact of this case on the legal system, law enforcement, and the community at large. Firstly, the legal outcomes were a mixed bag. While Ari Squire faced the consequences of his actions, the case prompted a reevaluation of legal procedures. New guidelines were introduced for more thorough background checks and psychological evaluations for people in positions of trust, like caregiving or mentorship roles. Law enforcement agencies also underwent scrutiny. The initial missteps in the investigation led to internal reviews and training programs aimed at improving investigative techniques. The goal was clear: to prevent another tragedy like this from slipping through the cracks. But what about the community? How do you heal a collective wound so deep? Well, healing is a slow process, but it has begun. Support groups were formed, offering a safe space for people to share their feelings and fears. Mental health resources were made more accessible, and educational programs about personal safety and awareness were introduced in schools. The scholarship fund and Justin's name continued to grow, turning a story of loss into a legacy of opportunity for young people with dreams as big as Justin's were. And let's not forget the murals and memorials that sprang up around town, immortalizing Justin's memory and serving as a daily reminder of the change that still needs to come. In the end, the story of Justin Newman and Ari Squire serves as a cautionary tale, a lesson in the complexities of human behavior, and a call to action for each of us. The aftermath is not just a chapter in this story, it's a chapter in the lives of everyone affected, pushing them to advocate for a safer, more just world. So, as we close this chapter, let's carry its lessons forward, turning our outrage and sorrow into meaningful action. Stay tuned for our concluding remarks and a special message for all our viewers. Before we conclude, let's delve into the psychological aspects of this case. What could possibly drive someone like Ari Squire to commit such a heinous act? And how did Justin Newman, a young man with dreams and aspirations, find himself entangled in this web of deceit and violence? First, let's talk about Ari Squire. On the surface, he seemed like an average man, but beneath that facade was a complex interplay of psychological factors. Experts suggest that Ari may have exhibited traits of narcissistic personality disorder, characterized by a lack of empathy and an inflated sense of self-importance. This could explain his audacious plan to fake his own death and assume a new identity, disregarding the life he would have to take to achieve this. But it wasn't just narcissism. There was also an element of desperation, perhaps stemming from financial troubles or a fear of losing social standing. This toxic mix of narcissism and desperation created a volatile psychological cocktail that led him down this dark path. Now, let's consider Justin Newman. He was a young man looking for opportunities, perhaps a bit naive but full of hope. Psychologically speaking, Justin was at a stage in life where he was still forming his identity, making him more susceptible to manipulation by authoritative figures like Ari. It's heartbreaking to think that Justin's trusting nature and Ari's manipulative tendencies converged in the worst possible way. The psychology of trust and betrayal played a significant role here, showing us how devastating the consequences can be when these dynamics are exploited. So, as we try to make sense of this senseless act, we're left grappling with unsettling questions about human nature. What are the limits of trust? How far can desperation push someone? And most importantly, how can we recognize the warning signs before it's too late? This case serves as a grim reminder that understanding the human psyche is not just the work of psychologists and therapists, it's a responsibility we all share. Because the more we understand, the better equipped we are to prevent tragedies like this from happening again. As we come to the end of this harrowing journey, we're left with a heavy heart and a restless mind. The story of Justin Newman and Ari Squire is one that shakes us to our core, forcing us to confront the darkest aspects of human nature and the flaws in our justice system. We've explored the psychological depths, the community's outrage, and the legal proceedings, but what we're left with is a void, an emptiness that no amount of justice can fill. Justin Newman's life was stolen from him, and while Ari Squire faced the consequences, the ripple effects of this tragedy continue to haunt both families and the community at large. If this story has moved you, angered you, or made you reflect on the complexities of human behavior and the justice system, then we've achieved our goal. But remember, awareness is the first step towards change. Let's ensure that Justin's life and the lessons we've learned from this case are not forgotten. Please, if you found this video informative and impactful, like it, share it, and subscribe for more deep dives into true crime stories that need to be told. Together, we can be a force for change, for justice, and for a better understanding of the human condition. Thank you for joining us today. Stay safe, stay aware, and most importantly, stay compassionate. Until next time.